If you had asked me a year ago what I stood for, I would have said loyalty, discipline, and family. Those were the pillars of my life. I built everything on them, brick by brick, without shortcuts and without scandal. My name is Michael Harris. I am 32 years old, and I used to believe that love could hold it all together. That belief ended the day the two people I trusted most tore it apart. I was not born skeptical. In fact, I believed the opposite. I thought people revealed themselves slowly over time, and if you paid attention closely enough, you would never be blindsided. But betrayal does not send you a warning. It wears the face of someone you know, maybe even two faces. At that point in my life, everything looked picture perfect from the outside. I lived in a corner loft overlooking the Chicago River. Top floor, exposed brick, sunlight pouring in every morning. On Sundays, a vintage record player spun Miles Davis while I cooked breakfast. I managed multi-million-dollar tech contracts and led teams filled with people sharper than I will ever be. I was not flashy, I was methodical. Structure was my identity. Then came Lauren Mitchell. 30 years old, polished, sharp with her words, and quick to laugh in a way that could disarm anyone. We met at a rooftop barbecue on the 4th of July. She was by the grill in a sundress, playfully arguing with someone about whether deep dish counted as real pizza. I tossed out a sarcastic comment, and she shot back without hesitation. That spark pulled me in. 3 months later, we were practically living together. By the 6th, I was sure she was the one. She slipped into my life as if she had always belonged there. A coffee mug next to mine, a spare key hanging on the hook, her perfume lingering on my jackets long after she left. My parents adored her. My mother, Susan, welcomed her right away. Sunday brunches turned into family game nights. Lauren helped her set the Thanksgiving table, lit candles before dinner, and laughed at her stories, even when they were not that funny. My father, Edward Harris, was generous with praise, but when it came to Lauren, it felt deeper. He called her a breath of fresh air, said I was lucky, told me she reminded him of my mom when they first met. To me, my father was more than just a parent. He was the model I measure myself against. 60 years old, silver hair always combed neatly, pressed suits even on weekends. He had built his real estate career the old-fashioned way, with firm handshakes, steady eye contact, and promises kept. People respected him. To me, he was untouchable, flawless. So when he embraced Lauren like the daughter he never had, I felt proud. I did not question it. When we got engaged, life shifted into high gear. The ceremony was set for St. Michael's Church in Old Town, the reception booked at the Chicago History Museum. Invitations printed on thick cream cardstock with embossed letters. Every detail mattered. I treated the planning like a military operation, vendors, backup plans, timelines. Lauren focused on the feeling, the flowers, the music, the mood. She told me once, I just wanted to feel like us. I believed her. The night before the wedding, tradition said we stay apart. I checked into the Palmer House Hilton with my dad. It felt right. One last quiet night between father and son before everything changed. We ordered room service, flipped through the guest list again, and laughed in hotel robes about who might cry first during the vows. He was calm, steady. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He excused himself to the bathroom. The screen lit up again. I was not looking for anything, but sometimes the truth forces itself into view. A text message from Lauren. Just the preview made my stomach twist. Thank you for last night. Your hands, your mouth. I will never forget it. I froze. The full message was worse, graphic, intimate. Attached was a photo. The two of them in bed. His arm around her waist, her bare shoulders pressed against him. The timestamp, 2 days before our wedding. That was the moment my world broke in two. One half looked the same. The other was nothing but ash. When he came back from the bathroom, I said nothing. I did not throw the phone. I did not confront him. I simply said I was tired. I smiled. Then I lay awake all night, phone in hand, taking screenshots, documenting every detail, replaying the betrayal again and again. It was not only what they did, it was the plan. They were going to stand with me the next day, smile, exchange vows, toast with champagne, and dance while everyone cheered. All while carrying that secret. But they underestimated me. Not my anger, my precision. I do not explode. I execute. I uploaded the screenshots to a secure cloud, built a private web page. Clean design, subtle font, simple navigation. At the very top of the card was a single QR code and one simple line, a little gift from the bride and groom. I had 200 of them printed. 200 small grenades dressed up as wedding favors. By 4 in the morning, the fuse was already burning. At 6:30, I called my attorney, Amanda Green. She answered on the second ring. Michael, is everything all right? Her voice carried concern. No, I said evenly. But it will be. I told her everything. Every detail, every receipt of betrayal. She did not interrupt. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Finally, she said, legally, you are in the clear. Morally, that is your decision. I will stand by just in case. I nodded even though she could not see me. Then I ended the call, stepped into the shower, and let the scalding water burn away whatever illusions I had left. When I stood in the mirror and tied my tie, I realized I was not a groom anymore. I was the reckoning. I arrived at the church early. St. Michael's in Old Town has that sacred quiet that dares you to speak above a whisper. The stained glass caught the morning sun, throwing shades of red and gold across the pews as if blessing the ceremony. But those colors had no idea what they were about to witness. Carol, our wedding coordinator, was already inside, clipboard in hand, efficient as always. She had organized dozens of weddings, most ending in happy tears. She had no idea she was standing in the middle of a battlefield disguised as a celebration. I handed her a small white box. Can you make sure these are passed out during the ceremony? She peeked inside. Cards with QR codes? She asked, curious. I shrugged lightly. A fun surprise for the guests. She smiled. Cute idea. Cute. Sure, that was one word for it. I watched her hand the box to her assistant without a second thought, checking off another task on her list, unaware of what she was holding. Outside, guests were beginning to arrive. Men in tailored suits, women in summer dresses, heels sinking into the grass near the lot. The kind of people who smile politely but gossip sharper than glass when given the right spark. They would have plenty of fuel soon. My mother, Susan, was next to pull up. She wore a navy dress with a matching clutch, her face lighting up when she saw me. Oh, sweetheart, you look, she paused, blinking too quickly. You look exactly like your father did on our wedding day. Her words hit harder than I expected. I kissed her cheek and told her I was glad she was there. And I meant it. She did not deserve the fallout that was about to happen. But when you light a fuse, there is no safe distance. I stepped into the groom's room, shut the door, and leaned against the wall. The air felt charged, like the seconds before a thunderstorm. I looked in the mirror. Black tux, crisp white shirt, cufflinks from my grandfather, hair slicked back as though I actually controlled something. Then came the knock. Michael, a soft voice said. It was Lauren. Can I come in? Just for a minute? Tradition said we were not supposed to see each other before the ceremony, but tradition was already bleeding out on the floor. I opened the door. She looked stunning. Ivory dress clinging to her figure, curls pinned perfectly, makeup sharp enough to belong in a bridal magazine. From the outside, she was the perfect bride, but I knew what hid beneath that facade. She smiled nervously. Hey, she whispered. Are you okay? I just stared at her a beat too long. She tilted her head. You look pale. Did you sleep at all? Barely, I said. She stepped closer, resting her hand on my chest. I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me, for believing in us. Today is the beginning of something big, and I know. I cut her off with a nod. See you at the altar. Something flickered in her eyes, confusion maybe, but she covered it with another smile. I love you, she whispered before walking out. I did not say it back. Not anymore. 20 minutes later, the organ began to play. Guests filled the pews, the air thick with perfume and chatter, polished expectations hanging over everything. All of it built on a lie. From the side aisle, I spotted Carol's assistant moving row by row, handing out the cream-colored cards. Scan for a special message from the bride and groom. Guests smiled, curious, delighted. Phones began to rise, cameras focused on the QR codes. Then the faces started to change. A cousin frowned. An aunt clutched her chest. One of my groomsmen shifted from foot to foot, uncomfortable. My old college roommate, Chris, leaned closer and whispered, Michael, something is not right. I kept my eyes forward, silent. Lauren had not made her entrance yet, but the church was already buzzing like a hive disturbed. Guests were whispering, phones glowing in their hands like flickering candles at a vigil. Then the double doors at the back opened. Lauren walked in, her arm linked with her father's, bouquet in hand, veil draped neatly down her back. She wore a radiant smile, the kind of smile only possible when someone has no idea the ground is about to give way beneath them. As she glided down the aisle, staring straight at me, I saw the tension ripple across the pews like a wave breaking around her feet. She never noticed. Not yet. My mother, Susan, sat stiff, pale as paper, her eyes locked on the screen of her phone. I watched her hands tremble before she passed the device to the woman beside her. Slowly, almost unwillingly, she turned her face toward my father. His calm demeanor had already begun to crack. His mouth parted slightly, but no words formed. His eyes darted across the room, trying to gauge just how far the damage had spread. The answer: too far to contain. Still, the organ kept playing. Lauren stopped just in front of me, wearing that soft, rehearsed expression of a bride about to capture the perfect Instagram moment. Father O'Connor welcomed the congregation. "We are gathered here today, in the presence of God and these witnesses." But his words were drowned out by the sound of unrest. A murmur here, a gasp there. Someone whispered too loudly. A phone slipped from a hand and clattered to the floor. The priest tried to push forward, but the ceremony had already been hijacked. Every set of eyes that should have been on us was glued to glowing screens. The QR codes had detonated. Finally, the priest reached the line no one expected to mean anything. "If anyone here has reason why this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now." I stepped forward and took the microphone. The room froze. Even the organist's hands lifted from the keys. Lauren's smile faltered, her face shifting from confidence to something fragile. "Yes," I said clearly, voice steady as steel. "I do." A silence spread through the church, sharp and brittle. Lauren blinked rapidly, her smile collapsing, as though her mind was scrambling to catch up with what she feared was coming. But I did not look at her. Not yet. I turned toward the congregation, the people who had come here to witness love. Now, they sat with jaws tight, phones glowing in their laps, the illusion fractured. I was only here to finish what truth had already started. "Before we move forward," I said, voice calm but cutting, "there is something all of you deserve to know." My father rose slowly to his feet. He did not speak. He simply stepped forward once, tentative, as if hoping he could somehow undo a detonation already set off. Lauren reached for me, fingertips brushing my sleeve, her mouth parting with some desperate words. I stepped back. Now I looked at her, really looked at her. The same green eyes that once made me believe in forever now reflected nothing but fear. "You told me once that real love is built on honesty," I said softly at first, just for her. "That secrets are poison." Her lips trembled. She said nothing. Then, louder so everyone could hear, I continued. "Last night, I stayed awake preparing for the most important day of our lives. You stayed awake in someone else's bed." Gasps broke out around us. A wave of disbelief and pity rolled through the pews. It sounded like an audience realizing they had been watching the wrong story all along. "I am not here to humiliate anyone," I continued. "I am not here for drama. I am here for truth." I gestured slightly toward the crowd. "By now, most of you have seen the message. The photos. The evidence. Your reactions say more than I ever could." I saw my aunt shaking her head, dabbing at tears with the lace handkerchief she had planned to gift Lauren. A childhood friend stared at the floor like he wanted to vanish into it. Someone dropped their program, the paper echoing in the silence. I turned back to Lauren. "I loved you," I said. "I would have gone through fire for you." She stepped forward, whispering urgently, "Please, Michael, can we talk privately?" "No," I answered firmly, not cruelly, but finally. "Because this was never private, Lauren. You wore my mother's ring while sleeping with my father. You intended to stand here in front of everyone, say 'I do,' and bury the truth." That is when I heard it, the raw, gutted sob of my mother. The sound split something deep inside me. I turned my head just slightly. She had both hands covering her mouth, her body folding in on itself as though she wanted to disappear. Beside her, my father stood paralyzed, his expression hollow, his feet nailed to the floor. He did not deny it. He did not move. Of course he did not. I turned back to the altar. I had thought about quietly calling the whole thing off, but the more I sat with it, the clearer it became. That would only mean covering for the very people who never once covered for me. protecting the lie instead of exposing it. So I stepped back from Lauren, set the microphone in Father O'Connor's hands, and told him, I won't be needing this anymore. The hush that followed was not ordinary silence. It was final, heavy, the kind that leaves no room for second chances. I turned and began walking down the aisle alone. Every step echoed against the marble floor, a sound that usually signaled something sacred. Today, it sounded like the curtain closing on a long-running performance. Behind me, Lauren broke down. Not a soft, pitiful cry, the kind of guttural wail that rips out of someone when regret finally forces its way through their throat. My father's voice followed, thin and desperate. Michael, but he never moved. Not this time. The doors swung open, and October air rushed against my face, cold and sharp. Outside, life hadn't changed. Cars rolled down the street. Birds lifted off the steeple. Strangers walked past, unaware that inside, a wedding had just turned into a funeral for the truth. I stood there for a moment, letting it sink into my bones. Then Chris jogged up behind me. Jesus, man, he muttered, out of breath. I don't even have a word. I gave a short nod. I didn't have a choice. He clapped my shoulder. You did the right thing. But I wondered, was there such a thing as right in this mess? No guidebook tells you what to do when your bride and your father decide to treat your wedding like some private joke. All I knew was that I couldn't stand there and fake a smile while swallowing poison. The truth is like fire. You either let it eat you alive in secret, or you set it free and watch it burn away everything false. Inside, the organ had gone silent. The noise had turned into a storm of raised voices, confusion, people crying. I did not look back. I couldn't. A woman in a pale dress brushed past me, phone in hand, shaking her head in disbelief. Then more guests began trickling out, some rushing past without a word, some glancing at me with tight nods, others avoiding my eyes entirely. But I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't broken. For the first time in a long time, I was unchained. By evening, the whispers had already grown legs. One of Lauren's cousins posted something cryptic online about the wildest wedding ever. Another relative uploaded a blurry shot of me leaving the church alone with the caption, "The truth walked away today, dignity intact." My inbox filled up. Missed calls stacked one after another. I didn't answer. Not that night. Instead, I poured a double bourbon, sat by the window of my condo, and finally let it all crash over me. The betrayal, the clarity, the silence. And under all that noise, a strange kind of peace. When you stop carrying someone else's lie, you finally learn how light your shoulders can feel. I didn't sleep. Not because I was wrecked, but because my mind was sharper than it had ever been. That kind of clarity only shows up when something breaks so hard in your life that the lies fall away like glass. At 3 a.m., I was still at the kitchen island, glass sweating in my hand. The red glow of the traffic light outside painted the walls in restless shadows. My tux jacket hung limp on the bar stool, as if it hadn't realized the wedding was over. I thought about all the spreadsheets, the vendor lists, the perfectly timed schedule I had built. None of it had prepared me for the sound of my mother breaking down in a pew, her husband exposed, the truth ripped out in front of everyone they knew. I kept seeing her face. Not Lauren's, not Richard's, hers. She was the only innocent one, and she had been crushed hardest. Still, I did not regret it, because I wasn't just leaving a wedding behind. I was cutting myself free from a lifetime of quiet loyalty, the kind that demanded silence even in the face of betrayal. By sunrise, the city was alive again. Garbage trucks groaned down the alleys. Horns blared. People rushed to work. Ordinary life, except my name wasn't ordinary anymore. When I finally looked at my phone, it was chaos. Dozens of texts, emails, even a voicemail from a local reporter I half recognized from a business profile years ago. Someone had filmed the whole thing. I didn't press play, but the headline was enough. Groom ends wedding with QR code exposure. Bride and father's affair revealed in front of stunned guests. I set the phone face down, stared at the ceiling. When the world decides to watch your pain, you get two choices. Let them consume you, or make damn sure they're watching the right story. So, I called Rebecca. She did not sound shocked. It was going to come out anyway, she told me. At least you took control of the story first. She warned me there would be consequences. I just said, there always are. She answered, fallout is just truth moving in public. And you are not the one who should be afraid. By lunchtime, the headlines had already begun. Lauren's company issued a neat little statement about reviewing personal conduct that conflicted with corporate values, which was their polite way of firing her. My father's firm said nothing. The silence was worse than words. Within hours, longtime clients started pulling their money. One of them, a man I grew up calling Uncle Rick, cut ties for good. I did not celebrate. This was not victory. It was consequence. That evening, I finally opened my laptop and watched the recording. The video was shaky, sideways, poor quality, but the sound was sharp. My voice steady at the mic. Lauren's gasp clear as day. The crowd's shift from curiosity to shock. And then the silence when I walked away. Watching it felt like watching a version of myself I no longer recognized. The comments section was alive. Some called it brilliant. Some called it cruel. One woman wrote, "That man didn't just dodge a bullet, he dodged a missile and still walked out with his head high." I closed the window. I was not searching for applause. What I needed was distance. So I did something I had not done in years. I left. No plans. No calendar reminders. No strategy. Just me. I booked a one-way ticket to Denver, tossed some clothes in a carry-on, left a note with the concierge, and took the last flight out that night. The altitude cleared my head. I hiked. I ate alone. I stayed in small cabins filled with old paperbacks and silence. No Wi-Fi, no noise. I didn't think about Lauren or Richard. I thought about me. About the version of myself who let red flags slide, who confused charm for character, who believed loyalty meant keeping quiet. That man died at the altar. Good riddance. On the 5th day, my phone rang. My mother. Her voice was raw. "I filed for divorce yesterday," she said. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I'm not," she replied, steady now. "Not anymore. Thank you." I did not ask what she meant. I already knew. When I returned to Chicago, my condo felt foreign, like it belonged to a stranger. The fridge still held things Lauren liked. Cheap Pinot Grigio, almond milk, strawberries in plastic tubs. I dumped them in the trash without hesitation. That night, I poured myself one glass of wine, stood at the big window overlooking the skyline, and raised it to endings that arrive late and beginnings that come right on time. Within a month, the frenzy cooled. That is the part no one tells you. Scandals fade. People move on. The public outrage burns hot, but never long. Someone else cheats, someone else gets exposed, and the mob turns its pitchforks somewhere else. But for the people inside it, the silence afterward is louder than the scandal itself. My mother and I spoke more often. Sometimes we talked for an hour, sometimes just a few minutes. She never asked me to explain. She never cried. We talked about her garden, about the books on her nightstand. One evening she said quietly, "I always thought I'd still be married at 62. I didn't answer. Some things need no reply. I heard things, though. Not directly, but whispers travel in a city like ours. Lauren had packed up her place and gone back to Wisconsin with her parents. Her mother refused to mention it. Her father stayed silent. Just a year earlier, they had thrown us an engagement party with speeches and slideshows of us smiling in childhood photos against tropical beach stock images. Now it was gone, deleted, archived, erased. But the internet never forgets. And neither did I. As for Richard, he stayed in Chicago. I heard from people in the real estate circle that he tried to keep his ground. He showed up to meetings, tried to joke, pretended like nothing had happened. But scandals don't just vanish. They stain. Nobody in real estate wants to shake hands with a man who sleeps with his son's fiancée. In a business built entirely on trust, that is the one sin you cannot bury. One by one, his clients walked away. Agents quit. 2 months after the wreck of what was supposed to be my wedding, his own partner filed to dissolve the company. I never called him. He never called me. Until one Thursday evening in the rain. I had just finished a late meeting and was sliding my key into the lock when I noticed someone at the end of the hall. Gray coat, rain dripping from the shoulders. He looked like a man dragging a weight no umbrella could cover. It was my father. "Daniel," he said, voice low. "Please, give me 5 minutes." I stayed still. He stepped closer, and for the first time, he looked old. Not just tired, but hollowed out, like guilt had bent his back. His hair was thinner, his eyes dull. "I ruined everything," he said. "You don't need to tell me. I already know." She meant nothing. It wasn't love. It was weakness. I was a fool. God, I was such a fool. The hallway light flickered. He swallowed hard, eyes wet. "I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I needed you to hear that I'm sorry. Not only for what I did, but for who I became. I leaned against the doorframe, finally speaking. I believed in you. For 32 years, I thought you were the kind of man I wanted to grow into. He shut his eyes, and I continued. You know what cut the deepest? Not the betrayal. Not even Lauren. It's realizing I never actually knew you at all. He gave a slow nod, the kind people give when the knife hits the exact spot they knew it would. I added, you're not the one I miss. And with that, I opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it. I never saw Richard again. Later I heard he moved north, some small town, trying to sell modest properties. No firm, no partners, no respect. Just a man pretending he hadn't blown up the only life that mattered. Good luck with that. As for me, I started over. I left the company I'd given nearly a decade of my life. Not out of shame, out of instinct. I needed a horizon that hadn't watched me break. An old friend from grad school offered me a leadership role at his AI startup in Austin. I packed light, sold the condo, tossed out every trace of Lauren, and left. Austin felt like a fresh skin, a city with no history attached to me. My new life came piece by piece. Morning strategy sessions, product meetings, lunches scribbled over whiteboards. Evenings on South Congress with earbuds in, the past just far enough behind me to breathe. That is where I met Elise. She was not flashy, not loud. She did not walk into rooms like a headline. She noticed things instead, the way I never sat with my back to the door, the way I always checked my screen before answering a call, how my hand hovered over a glass but rarely lifted it until I was sure. She gave me space. Months later, when I finally told her about the wedding, she didn't gasp or call it insane. She simply nodded and said, "And you're still standing." That was the first time I actually smiled about it. Not because I was proud, but because I felt lighter. The shame was never mine to carry, and for once, I believed that. Austin did not interrogate me. That was the gift. A city warm, but not nosy. A rhythm that did not rush. People who didn't care who I was before I arrived. Anonymity isn't a cure, but it's a bandage. It lets the bleeding stop. But the past waits. Always. Sometimes in memories, sometimes in unexpected envelopes. One day, buried in a pile of junk mail, I noticed a plain white envelope with careful handwriting. No return address. Postmarked from Madison. I almost tossed it. Something about the handwriting stopped me. It was from Lauren. The first line of her letter stopped me cold. I am not asking for forgiveness. I already know better. I sat there at my kitchen table, holding that paper like it had teeth. The dog was curled up by the door, breathing steady, unaware that the past had just walked back into my house. I read her words once, then again, and I still could not tell what she wanted from me. She wrote about regret, about how she still dreams of that church sometimes. The silence, the stares, my mother's face breaking. She swore the affair wasn't planned. Said it began with innocent moments, leaning on my father when she felt overwhelmed. She called it kindness at first, then safety, until it became something else entirely. She admitted it was never love, just escape. I needed someone to make me feel seen, she wrote, and I picked the worst possible person. She listed what she had lost, her job, her reputation, most of her friends. People whispered about her in offices, sometimes even to her face. She said she wasn't searching for redemption, just hoping I had found peace. I folded the paper, slid it back in the envelope, dropped it in a drawer. Then I opened the window and let the night air in, because I had found peace. But not because of her words, and sure as hell not because of her pain. I found peace the moment I stopped trying to untangle why. There is no math in betrayal, no clear equation. People do it because they want to, because they think they can, because they believe you won't notice. That was their final mistake. A month later, I ran into someone I never expected, Emily, Lauren's sister. It was at a Dallas conference, a panel on behavioral design and AI tools. She worked UX for a partner firm. At first, I didn't recognize her. Her hair was short now, glasses on, shoulders heavier somehow. But then I caught her name tag and froze. She noticed, gave me a small, guilty smile. "Didn't think you'd run into me here, huh?" "No," I said flatly. But surprises seemed to be a pattern in my life. She flinched, nodded. "I swear, Daniel, I had no idea about what they did." "I believe you," I answered. And I did. She looked down, then back at me. She hasn't been the same since. Moved back home. Barely leaves her room. She's not really sorry. Just lost. It makes sense, I said. But that's her burden, not mine. Emily nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I respected how you handled it. Not the exposure, but the dignity. You could have burned that church to the ground. But you didn't. I gave a thin smile. No one wins in a fire. You just choose how you walk out of it. We didn't trade numbers. Didn't pretend we'd stay in touch. Some meetings are better left untouched. Two people acknowledging a wound without tearing it open again. That night, back at my hotel, I sat on the balcony replaying her words. Dignity. Everyone seemed to use that word. Commenters online, strangers in articles, even people close to me. But dignity wasn't what I was chasing that day at the altar. It was truth. And once truth burns its way into your bones, you cannot go back to living without it. Not in marriage, not in business, not even with yourself. So I built my life around it. No secrets, no masks, no rehearsed lies. If someone couldn't match that, I walked away. Elise saw it in me. One night, half joking, she asked, "Have you always been this allergic to nonsense?" I smiled. Not always. But I built a damn good immunity. She didn't push. She just squeezed my hand. Rebuilding after betrayal is strange. At first, you think trust is dead forever, that you'll never open up again. But the truth is, trust doesn't die. It just learns how to read people better. I still believe in loyalty. But now I know it begins with myself. That spring, Austin bloomed early. The trees outside my apartment lit up in defiance of everything I had left behind. I'd crack the window, hear birds I couldn't name, neighbors who didn't know mine. It was anonymity you couldn't buy. The kind you only earn by shedding an identity that no longer fits. Work moved fast. My team launched a prototype 3 weeks early. One of our predictive models crushed the baseline by 37%. People tossed around phrases like promotable, future founder, long-term play. I didn't care about the titles. What mattered was that I was building something on my own terms. No father's shadow. No fiancé rehearsing vows while texting someone else's husband. Just me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing revenge. That chapter of my life closed the second I walked out of that church and left Lauren and my father in the wreckage. But the part no one warns you about isn't the betrayal. It's the silence after. It is not the public explosion that shapes you. It is the echo that comes when the crowd leaves, when the story stops being fresh gossip and you are left alone with the mess. Healing isn't something people post about. It's what happens after the noise dies. A few months into my new job in Austin, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I almost let it ring out, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice, measured, professional. "Mr. Daniels, this is Richard's attorney. He asked me to reach out. No legal issues, just a request for a meeting. He says he'll accept your choice either way." I stayed silent. She added softly, "He isn't well." I agreed. Not because of pity, but because some ghosts only stay buried if you face them head on. We met at a quiet cafe just outside Chicago. Mid-afternoon, nearly empty. The kind of place where even the music plays at half volume. He looked smaller than I remembered. Suit hanging off him like borrowed clothes. His face thinner, skin gray, posture collapsed. When he spotted me, he stood. I didn't shake his hand. I just sat down. He seemed unsurprised. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "I only hoped we could talk." I studied him. "You had 3 decades of chances to talk. You chose something else." He lowered his eyes. "I know." The silence between us stretched, heavy and final. Then he slid a folded letter across the table. "I wrote this the day after the wedding," he said. "I never had the courage to send it. I didn't touch it." He sighed. "I lost everything. My business. My reputation. Your mother. You. I deserved all of it. But I need you to understand something. It didn't start with lust." I raised an eyebrow. His voice cracked as he rushed on. "It started with admiration. Lauren reminded me of who I used to be. Hungry, alive, not worn down yet. I fed off that. Thought it would give me something back." I stared at him. "Did it?" He gave a sad smile. "No. It just destroyed what I had left." He stood slowly, reaching for the letter. I placed my hand on it, not to keep it, but to stop him. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I just don't feel anything for you anymore." His shoulders slumped. He nodded once and left. I didn't read the letter. Left it on the table. Some things belong to the past. A week later, Elise and I went away for a weekend. Nothing dramatic, no big speeches. Just the quiet comfort of two people who know how to share silence. She asked me about the cafe. I told her everything. She never interrupted, never tried to fix it. When I was finished, she tilted her head and said, "You know, when you talk about pain, you sound like someone filing documents. Like every wound has a label and a drawer." I smirked faintly. "If I don't organize it, it organizes me." She nodded. "Fair. But maybe some boxes aren't meant to close." That thought stayed with me. Maybe healing isn't about sealing scars. Maybe it's about learning to live fully while they're still open. That spring, I deleted the last trace of the wedding from my cloud. No RSVPs, no budget sheets, no folder labeled Plan B. Just a clean desktop. I didn't feel lighter, but I felt finished. And that was enough. Sometimes I wonder what people remember from that day. The gasp when the QR code went live? The silence when I spoke? The old guests holding blank cards, too confused by technology, but not by betrayal? Or maybe it wasn't the chaos at all. Maybe it was the quiet afterward. The image of me walking down the aisle alone while 150 people tried to rewrite the story in their heads. That walk. That's the only part I've never regretted. For once in my life, I was stripped of every performance, every polite lie, and I kept walking anyway. Clean, honest, untouched by their secrets. A few weeks after that cafe meeting, I got an email from an old colleague. The email subject line read, "You should probably see this." No message, just a link. I hesitated for a second, then clicked. It took me to a small-time real estate blog, the kind no one really follows. But the headline hit me like a hammer. Richard Daniels leaves real estate industry after scandal fallout. The article wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs about how a man once considered untouchable was now handling retail listings in some quiet town outside Neepville. There was even a grainy photo, my father, wearing a navy polo, standing in front of a faded property sign. A man who once closed multi-million-dollar penthouse deals in custom suits now looked like someone trying to remember who he used to be. I stared at that picture longer than I expected. Not out of pity, just the realization that the worst punishment was exactly this. He had to wake up every day and live inside the shell he created. No courtroom, no angry speech, no staged revenge could ever top that. See, vengeance isn't the explosion. It's the silence afterward, the absence, the way you walk away and never look back while they sit in the ruins. That lingers longer than any fire. At work, nobody really knew. A few people had caught vague rumors of some insane wedding back in Chicago, but the details never traveled far. And I preferred it that way. To them, I was just Daniel, the steady hand under pressure, the guy who got things done without theatrics. If only they knew. One Friday night, Elise showed up with bags of Vietnamese takeout. Her favorite. We sat on the balcony, the city lights flickering like careless stars. In the middle of her meal, she set down her chopsticks and said, "You never really talk about them." I knew exactly who she meant. I took a slow sip of water and placed the glass down. "It's not that I don't think about it," I said. "It's just, I don't carry it anymore." She nodded, thoughtful. "That's real growth," she said. Then after a pause, "Do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" I looked at her, not with hesitation, but with the calm you earn after walking through fire and surviving it. "I don't think love is something you fall into anymore," I told her. That word fall makes it sound reckless. Out of control. She tilted her head. "So what is it then?" I smiled faintly. "I think love is something you build, on solid ground, with blueprints, no secret doors, no traps." She leaned back, considering that. "Finally," she said, "that actually sounds like something I could trust." We didn't kiss that night. We didn't make promises. But something passed between us anyway. A quiet alignment, like two people finally agreeing to build a house from the foundation instead of chasing a fantasy. And I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of pain, not of loss, not even of love. Because once you've survived the collapse of everything you believed in, you stop living in illusions. You start planting truth instead, not flashy, but deep. By year's end, I had cut social media out completely. Not because I was bitter, but because I no longer needed the noise. There was no one left to prove anything to. Not the gawkers from that church. Not the ones who whispered afterward. Not the fake supporters who pretended they were in my corner. Silence teaches you things. You stop chasing closure. You stop over-explaining. And one day, you realize wounds you thought were permanent have scarred over. Not gone, but not bleeding anymore either. But ghosts never vanish. They just take new forms. One afternoon, I got an email from the church, St. Michael's. Subject line, unclaimed vendor balance. Apparently, a small deposit of $500 had been left behind when the wedding collapsed. They offered to refund it. I had no memory of it. I typed back, donate it to the youth music program. A few minutes later, the administrator replied, thanking me, saying the funds would go toward new instruments for the choir kids. I stared at the screen, then let out a dry laugh. That money had been set aside for a jazz trio at a wedding reception that never happened. Now it would help kids learn violin. Fitting. Life has a way of redistributing meaning. The people who betray you rarely get punished the way you imagine. Sometimes they get what they thought they wanted, and realize too late that it's a prison. And sometimes your own losses bloom into something better, quietly, without fanfare. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. I wanted to build. One rainy evening, Elise and I wandered into a small bookstore. The glass fogged as the storm pressed against the windows. She picked up a memoir about recovering from betrayal. I reached for a novel about architecture. At checkout, the clerk squinted at me and said, "You look familiar. Were you on the news?" I froze for a heartbeat, then smiled lightly. "Probably just one of those faces," I said. He laughed. "Yeah, happens to me all the time too. That is the kind of justice nobody claps for, but it settles deep and does not fade. The kind that lingers long after the noise dies down. So if you are standing in your own silence, or staring at a choice that feels like it might break you, remember this. You do not need to shout to be understood. You just need to tell yourself the truth. When that moment arrives, trust me, you will know what to do." I did, and I never turned around. If any part of this story stirred something in you, something you have lived through but kept buried, leave a comment. You are not the only one carrying it. Here at Shadowed Revenge USA, we share the quiet stories, the ones that shift you without warning and stay in your bones. If you are rebuilding, healing, or simply taking the first step toward starting over, click on the next story waiting on your screen. This is not where it ends. This is where you finally choose yourself. Thank you for listening. Wherever you are tonight, stand firm, stay focused, and keep walking forward on your own terms.